Is this a lesson which you also learned from Brancusi, studying the Brancusi
I think,
sculptures?
well, I think Brancusi stacks in that way. Although if you take Terragis, it's not really that. It looks like it's that, but basically it's a pole with, it's like a pole with beads. It's like you put a pole, you put a bead, you put another bead. I don't want to reduce, you know, the endless column to a bunch of beads, but in fact that's what it is. But the one upstairs, the carving here, what was interesting about Brancusi, and after I got back to New York, actually, I had Sidney Geist's book, which was like, you know the book? That became kind of like my Bible. I would look at it every day and reread it and reread it. And what was interesting is when Brancusi came to New York in '22, and he had a show at the Blummer Gallery, and he had cut an endless column from floor to ceiling. Now, if you think of later minimalism, with Judd stacking from floor to ceiling, or you think of the division of floor to ceiling, that had already been predated and prefigured by Brancusi. Where my work picks up in relation to Brancusi isn't on the pedestal, because I think that's the problematic of Brancusi still. And even in this show, even in this show, you're putting pedestals on top of pedestals. And the pedestal, for me, is a way of retaining the image, but keeping the person out of the context or the behavioral space where they can become the subject matter of the experience. But what Brancusi implied in Terragis with the endless column and the gate of the kiss and the table was just exactly what I was interested in. So my evolution was picking up on the later aspect of Brancusi's aspiration, namely what he did in Terragis.
Did you visit the space?
No, I haven't been.
You haven't been, yeah.
No, but yesterday the man from Romania asked me to come. If he sends me a ticket, I'll definitely go.
Exactly. Very good. That brings me to another aspect of your work, that, and you mentioned already this break in history of sculpture, though, and a quotation from an interview you gave in 2008, I think is revealing about this new aspects in sculpture which your generation brought in. You say, back in the mid-60s, if I had to give a brief on what I thought sculpture needed to be, it was to do away with the object, to get sculpture off the pedestal and expand the space of the field, to open up the container and to foreground time and bodily movement in relation to the intensity of place and context. I'm basically still doing that. So I mean, it's your whole program already in the late, which you developed already in the late 60s.
Is that what I said in the 60s?
No, in the 2008. But looking back at your at the late 60s.
I thought if I said that in the 60s, it would be very precocious.
No. 2008, looking back at the 60s. Yeah. At your first.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what I'm about. I mean and if anything, I'm still about trying to deal with the context of the space and relationship to the matter and material I use. And I think one of the things that you learn about matter, about whatever material you use, is the matter itself imposes its own form on form. So if you use wood, it's going to impose its form on form. If you use concrete, it's going to be different than wood. It's going to impose its form on form. And I think Kahn said it very well. He said, I look at a brick and I ask it what it wants to be. I think one of the things that got kind of lost in the late 60s, early 70s when conceptualism came in is the notion of the physicality of material or the logic of the material got kind of displaced with the sentencing of I'm going to have people make this or that without any concern for what the physical material was or what it would react to or how one could use it. And I think the choice of material for anyone who makes anything is very private, very singular, very, very subjective, and you have to stay with a material, whatever the matter is, to understand it, so, which means that you have to go through a great deal of failure with it, a great deal of hardship with it, and a learning curve. And the more you know about material, finding the material will reveal the potential it has internally to allow you to understand the potential of its logic to do what you want to do. I can say I've been working with steel now for, I don't know, 40 years or whatever, and I'm just being able to see, not only because of new technology, the fact that you can make it weightless, the fact that you can turn it in certain ways, the fact that you can do things that were never attempted before in the history of the Industrial Revolution with it, because either the technology wasn't available or artists hadn't dealt with it other than in pictorial means. That's not to belittle the sculptors who have worked in steel. I have nothing against what, you know, Picasso and Calder have done. It's just that they didn't use steel in a way that I think is more relevant to its potential. I mean, I'm not interested in painting figures in steel.
Sure. Good.
Pardon me, Picasso.
You know, he's a saint in this house.
Pardon?
He's a saint in this house. So.
I've seen so much of them in the past couple of years, it's beginning to annoy me. I mean, I think Picasso is probably the greatest artist of the last century, no doubt, and his genius is completely mind-boggling. And the last time we were here, about 10 days ago, we visited the museum here, and I went outside hitting my head thinking, how could one person have made those kinds of shifts? I mean, sometimes you see it between one year and the next, completely shift in work, and equally full and expressive and different content with a kind of energy and passion and invention that's just hard to fathom. I mean, without a doubt, he's an enormous figure. We're probably not going to see the likes of anything like that again for, I have no idea. There's no one around like that now.
Okay. Okay.